name is Sebastian Hilbert, and I'm the Wellnesspreneur expert. I help wellness business owners to avoid the digital overwhelm and grow their business with an effective online presence. Today, I'm really excited and happy to welcome Eloise King, the self-love expert. How are you, Eloise?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me, Sebastian.
You're very welcome. I'm really excited to have you here today because I know one of my clients actually does your self-love project with you, launched in 2016, which is a fabulous online course. And he's absolutely loving it. And I think you have done something really great that really talks about the inner game for business owners. And that really is so important because I've just recently been through this to build my confidence. And this always starts with self-love. So something really beautiful you created there. You have also interviewed some amazing people in your life, like Deepak Chopra, Dyer, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and many more. You actually created Soul Session, which we see in the background of your video today. It's pretty cool for all those who listen to the podcast. We will definitely put it in the notes so so everyone can find it. One thing you also did was creating an online summit where you actually got 13,000 business owners in, which is really impressive. And I know it has been quite roller coaster journey for you, that one. So where you had to do a lot.
Yes, that was very labor intensive, that one.
Yeah, I can imagine. So it would be awesome to hear some about that today. But one thing you said when it came to what you've been through is that you moved from being intrinsically goal-driven to become intrinsically motivated and sustainably well, and being back on an all creative on all levels. And I think that's something really, really cool. And that's something very recent, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's been the last couple of years, really. So, and just to clarify, that's moving from being extrinsically motivated to being intrinsically motivated. So, yeah, it's been 100% the most rewarding and valuable part of my journey to date.
Yeah, amazing. And I remember meeting you the first time at the Wellnesspreneur Revolution with Andy and Marcus in Sydney.
Yes.
And you gave some really cool insights around imagining what you want and like in your head, basically, and how powerful that can be. Can you maybe take us back to that and tell us a little bit around what happened there and where that came from? Because it was a really cool story.
Oh, I was sort of like desperately trying to figure out which part of that presentation you were talking about, but I think you're talking about the interview that I did with Wayne Dyer. Is that the story?
Yeah, I think that you had a book launch or something and you saw him and he told you how you can use your imagination to get something, and you said, I'm going to put this to the test.
Yeah.
And do you remember now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember. That's the Wayne Dyer story. So basically, I was a journalist for a long time, a News Limited journalist, and then transitioned from that to running Soul Sessions, where I interviewed lots of people, as you've just said in the introduction. And I remember Wayne Dyer was coming to town to launch one of his books, and the book was called Wishes Fulfilled. And as soon as I rang my contact to see if I could line up some time with Wayne while he was in town, he literally answered the phone and said, Eloise, ask me anything today except to get an interview with Wayne Dyer. And I was like, what do you mean? He said he's arriving in town. He's only going to be here for 3 or 4 days. He's with his daughter. He's also not 100% healthy and well. So he's just very low key, not doing any interviews or media. He's just like turning up for the book launch and then getting out of here. And I was like, oh, okay. What can you do? So, c'est la vie. So then I was going to the book launch. It was over in Darling Harbour. I think there was somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people at this book launch. And I happened to have a seat in like the third or fourth row or something like that. And as he was talking, very inspiring man, very wise, a lot of life experience, and really some really interesting tips he was sharing in this book that was called Wishes Fulfilled. He took the audience through a process whereby we had to think about something that we wanted to manifest, or something that we were kind of, something that we want to manifest, as simple as that. So I thought, and he was going to walk us through these steps to actually make that happen. And I thought, okay, well, let's really put your steps for manifestation to the test. So I sat there in row 4, row 3, and I was like, I am going to use your tips on manifestation to try and manifest an interview with you. And then I'll know whether what you're sharing is true or not, right? So I sat there, and he was like, step 1 and step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And I was, part of it was like getting a really clear picture of what it was that you wanted to happen. So like so I was imagining Wayne and I sitting in a park, talking across each other, like having this conversation about things I wanted to ask him, and just, a bit of laughter. And like, so I had that really clear picture in my head. And then he basically, invites you to kind of use all of your senses to make that real, and then went through the rest of the steps. And then the last step is to basically let it go, to like get it so clear, bring it really close, and then to kind of let it go. And so I did. I walked away from that night and went home, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and then I happened to get a call I was working in the city at the newspaper at the time. I got a call to go and conduct another interview at a like kind of upmarket hotel in the middle of the city, in the middle of the CBD. So I went there, and as I walked in across the kind of lobby, I bumped into my contact that I'd had that original phone call with, and he was there with Wayne Dyer's PA. He was like, Eloise, let me introduce you to Wayne Dyer's PA. And I was like, what? No, like, what a surprise to be meeting you, first of all. And then got talking to her. She said, oh my God, Wayne's upstairs. Do you want to have a photo with him? And I was like, yes, I'd love to have a photo with him. Met Wayne, had a chat. I said, I really wanted to interview when you were in town, but I understand you're really busy and you've got other things planned. He goes, well, why don't we do that? Let's meet tomorrow. And so I, frantically got on the phone and organised the film crew and all that. And we met him in Hyde Park the next day, and I got my interview. So as we were finishing up the interview, we were walking back to his hotel room. He had a book for me that he wanted to sign. And we were walking back, and I said, oh, by the way, Wayne, I've got to tell you, like, fill you in on a little secret. I sat in your audience and I went through your 5 steps, or however many it was, for manifestation, wishes fulfilled. And the thing I was manifesting was this interview with you, which I'd been told was 100% impossible while you were in town. And he just laughed and he said, oh, of course,
Of course.
It is a great story. It was a beautiful sort of, like confirmation, I guess, or affirmation that power of the mind really is extraordinary. And wishes do come true, I guess.
Exactly. And that's exactly why I wanted you to tell the story again, because first of all, I think it's a fascinating story just as it is, but it also really demonstrates, as you just said, the power of the mind. And you read that in many books, but actually having an kind of a success case study on something like that is sometimes a bit hard to find. And it's so tangible, and so in such a short period as well. It's not, you think, oh, my aspiration is to have this big vision that I want to fulfill in my life, and that's what I trying to manifest, but you can actually use this also for short-term goals, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually we should also mention that it's not just the power of the mind. The mind is extraordinary, but what's really important is that you bring the heart into it, and that you use positive emotional sort of frequency, the power of the heart, you marry that with the power of the mind, and that's actually what sort of pulls things into your vortex, if you want to call it, pulls things out of the vortex into your kind of realm, or your space.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that fits also so beautifully with what you do with the self-love project, because again, it's about your confidence, your inner feeling, all these emotions. And I experienced it myself. I hit rock bottom with my business last year in November, and then I just dug myself out of it and became a new me because of that, what I've been through, and gained new confidence and motivation, and also self-love, which was a big challenge for me. And that really kind of attracts others.
Definitely. And you know what? It's a big challenge for everyone. Self-love, like our conditioning is not to be self-loving. I mean, we're born self-loving. We're born like embodying the whole, you know, the just kind of natural love, you know, we're born like that, but we do become conditioned to, you know, operate from a very different place, whether it's our education system, whether it's the way we're parented, whether it's, and it's not just, you know, the fault of one parent or both parents or whatever family style you came from, but it's pervasive, especially across the Western world, that, you know, there are ways that we have to behave to be seen, to be lovable, and to receive, you know, people's to receive people's love, you know, like, and there are things that we need to do, like, you know, depending on how harsh this part of your upbringing was, but, you know, whether it's getting exams or, you know, like achieving well in exams, or, you know, making certain elite sport teams or whatever it is, we do learn throughout our upbringing that we need to sort of have certain things happen or achieve certain things in order to get people's praise and love and attention. So there are lots of different versions of that, but I'm not saying that achieving great things is not wonderful, because of course it is. It's an amazing experience to be out there creating and achieving goals, but it's really important to learn how to separate your worth, your self-worth as a human being and as an individual, as a person in the world, and your achievements, because just purely by being a consciousness or an energy in the world, a human being, you are worthy, you know, that has worth in itself. You're a human being, you're here, you're worthy. And then the achievement stuff is kind of a separate game, I think. And that's been it's been a huge journey in my own life, and I think in truth it's a huge journey in most people's lives, you know, to varying degrees depending on the upbringing and the, you know, the culture that they're residing in.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is a wonderful segue to telling us your story, Eloise.
Yeah.
What has that story been? Where did it start to get to this whole self-love?
Yeah, interesting. Like, you know, the sort of 20 words or less, well, not even 20 words, but the kind of elevator pitch version of it, I guess, is I was, I majored in psychology at the University of Sydney, and then I was sort of always wanted to be a psychologist or a journalist, believe it or not. Like, and I was lucky enough while I was studying to work at News Limited in a very different role to, like, I was on the phones taking classifieds ads, but I started making connections, and, you know, as I graduated, fairly soon after I graduated from university, I was offered a cadetship to become a journalist. And so I worked at News Limited for about 13 years and spent around 10 of those years writing for different sections of the different newspapers, different sections of the papers. And I found, while that was an amazing place to work and gave me access to so many incredible, not only skills and, you know, but also to people and kind of pockets of the city and the world, really. I found that I got to a point where I was unhappy, uncomfortable in my own skin, and really unsatisfied with the status quo, you know. And so I started reading books, and I started kind of, lucky I was in this position to be able to kind of get interviews with whoever I wanted to speak to, really. And so I started interviewing people about stuff that I was needing to kind of learn more about, you know, in my quest for kind of change. And then eventually I became sort of unsatisfied with the process of interviewing someone, writing a story and sending it out for, I don't know, 12 million people or however many people to read. And I wanted to connect with people that were having the same struggles, I guess, as me. And so that's when I started Soul Sessions. And it was really a forum for we would have crazy, amazing, wonderful, funny, interesting, intelligent dinner parties for like 33 people. They were always themed. And so we had a chef come in, and then we had a couple of speakers that would come in and talk to a theme. So it might have been raising enlightened children, or it could have been sex, love and domestic bliss, or that, or lack thereof. Or we had secret women's business once, we had secret men's business. We did amazing conversations is what we were hosting. And what became fairly clear was that people wanted more than just a conversation. They then wanted to take the information and do something with it. So that's when we started running programs. So we started to develop programs around what we were hearing from people, what people wanted. And soon after that, we launched the Souluversity. So the Souluversity is a platform that grew out of Soul Sessions, but basically runs a number of programs that help people to not only understand, get access to really high quality information, but to actually be held accountable in activating that information, which kind of brings me to another point that I'm really passionate about, and that's that information is no longer power. Like, we have information at the end of our fingertips. Like, pretty much we can find whatever we're looking for with Google these days. But what is powerful is the activation, being held accountable, the activation of that information. And so that's really, I guess, what my journey was. And what I see for a lot of people is that they know a lot, but you have to activate it in your life for it to really kind of produce results for you, and to be the power that you're maybe expecting just from the information.
Yeah, very, very good. What were some key moments where you said, okay, this is like now really hard? Like, for instance, with the Soul Session, you said that was like, in terms of what you had to put in terms of effort. That was really like a point I remember you said that was really hard. What were some key moments, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things for anybody that's run events, in the early days, we were running events every 2 weeks sometimes, or every month. So every 2 to 4 weeks we would have another event. Now, events are quite labor intensive. There's a lot of variables. You've got to sell tickets, you've got to get bums on seats, you've got to kind of set up your interview guests, you've got to get the chef, make sure that's all happening, you've got to create the physical space, you've got to, there's so much involved in a live event. And also they're expensive. Live events are quite expensive to run as well, run well. And so I think that was really hard, like after doing it, while we created a lot of goodwill and created some really amazing, amazing conversations and great connections, and built a lot of brand equity, I guess, if you want to call it that. It wasn't massively financially rewarding, and it was actually unsustainable. And the realization was, like, I'd moved from being a journalist to suddenly running a business without any business knowledge. I just followed my passion, followed my charm. And so I had to kind of then start to go, oh my God, like, I have to educate myself around business principles, and I have to figure out how to pivot or do things differently in order to make this sustainable and make this kind of not only, create some financial kind of wealth for myself to be able to live, but also to not, to not run myself into the ground as a result of it. So there was a big learning in that. There was a big learning in that. That was one of the big challenges.
Yeah. And that's how the self-love project then kind of emerged, because of that experience that you had to go back to yourself, or?
Longer term, I think, yes, it was definitely, because what I was doing is I was putting the business and the business needs before my own for too long, let's put it that way. And then especially with a business like Soul Sessions or Souluversity, you know, something that's very much in the wellness space and kind of encouraging people to live more consciously and, you know, be sort of better versions of themselves. Eventually kind of the lesson became so big for me that I sort of crashed and burned. Like, we were out there hosting all these conversations and running all these programs and all the rest of it, but my business was in charge of me eventually, rather than me being in charge of it. And what eventually happened was I did crash and burn, you know, like I actually just kind of lay down next to my son one night, actually. And I won't tell this story like in too much detail, but I lay down, I closed my eyes, and it was so peaceful just for a minute. And I remember going, oh, this peace. And then I found myself running up and sort of projectile vomiting over in the bathroom, which happened for like 24 hours. And that was this purging of a way of life almost. And that became a real kind of line in the sand for me, or a moment of transition where I went, okay, this is completely unsustainable and I need to figure out how to do this completely differently. So to bring it back to your question about the self-love project, what happened was I invited a guru to move into my home for 12 weeks. His brief was very clearly, I said, I'm done with operating from fear and stress and all this kind of old conditioning. I don't want to create from this place of that. And I'm also aware of what a big job this is. So I need to, you know, replace all of that with a completely different level of conditioning where I'm putting self-love first. So I'm putting self first, not business, not family, not everything else. Self comes first, and then I want to kind of reprogram myself in that to really honor what I need in every moment first, so that I can then go out and create. But secondly, to literally reprogram, rewire, like reorientate myself so that my motivation for things is much more kind of love fueled and inspired, rather than just running to keep up with what the business needs, or, you know. And you know, and so yeah, from there, I, as a journalist, as a researcher, I spent almost a year researching all of this stuff, and writing and developing, I guess, my own practice and my own experience of that, you know, definitely with support along the way. And then I launched the Self-Love Project kind of off the back of that, which is a combination of so much research, personal experience, guidance from other really wise people, and just pulled it all together in the Self-Love Project, which we've been running since 2016 now.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So you basically put everything upside down, recreated yourself, recreated what you do. And compared to before, how is that going for you?
Oh, it's amazing. It's a completely different way of being, and a completely different way of doing business, a completely different way of being in the world. And I know you mentioned Andy and Marcus from the Wellness Leadership Academy, and I know they, you know, one of the reasons we've partnered with, done some work with them, is that they very strongly promote the fact that, you know, your business, if you use the metaphor as a tree, you use the metaphor of your business being like a tree, you know, you can imagine this like really beautiful old wise oak tree, for example, that's kind of strong and robust and, like, you know, looking amazing in the world. But that tree can only grow as high and as strong and as wide as its roots grow deep. So if you're wanting to kind of create something that's very strong and sustainable and produces great, you know, product for the people that it comes into contact with, you need to make sure that your roots are, roots of self are very firmly kind of, sort of integrated in the ground beneath you. So that to use that metaphor, the roots are kind of like your self-love project, and as long as your self-love practice, I guess, and as long as you're taking care of the roots, nourishing the self, watering the self, like looking after the self, making sure those roots are really firmly healthy and planted and kind of, down there, then your business has a huge capacity, a great energy source, a really strong platform and base from which to grow big and strong and wide. And so that's
in whatever form you desire.
In whatever form you desire. I love that you said that too, because I think, I think the world of self-development, spirituality, all that sort of stuff can actually be quite dangerous sometimes, and has done a lot of damage for a lot of people, because, and that might sound a little bit controversial, but so often these like big success, like, motivational speakers, they'll go out and they'll talk about, have your massive vision, like it's possible to take over the world, stay connected to that vision and all the rest of it. I don't doubt and I don't argue for one second that you do need to have some kind of vision of what you're working towards, but if the goal is so big and so massive that it's either, I don't know, if you're setting yourself up so that the only measure of success is this vision of something that's global and massive and earning millions of dollars and all the rest of it, then actually you're making it quite difficult for yourself, like it's a much healthier approach to kind of understand that would be a really nice thing maybe one day if that's what you want, but a lot of people don't want that. Like what you have to actually do to create the global this and that is, you might have to travel 10 months of the year if you want that. Now and that is exhausting for some people and completely unsustainable, or they've got families and they don't want to be away from their families for that period of time. So it's about, I think it is important to be able to kind of have a vision of what you want to create, but in a sustainable way, and also something that is well thought through and realistic for you and the people that you love that are in your life. Because ultimately, if you're constantly reaching for something that you're never quite getting, then that can impact the people in your life, as well as it can create stress in you. And then, as an extension of that, you can't actually create much that feels particularly amazing from a place of stress alone. Like all of the like amazing creative kind of projects, they do come from a place of great energy usually. So there's got to be an alignment between you and what you're creating, and you've got to make sure that it's sustainable. So rather than the big visions, I think it's better to have smaller, more realistic goals along the way, and then kind of, create your little community first, like, and then kind of if you want to kind of grow further, then maybe it's like statewide, and then maybe it's national, and then it's, you know what I mean? Like, every will have a different version of that, but
I really like that, because I used to, have this big goal, and I always felt a little bit disappointed because I thought I'm not moving fast enough. And that did not do very good things to me, let's say. But when I started to really nurture myself and also set a smaller goal first, and then maybe a smaller vision, and use this whole mission value thing as a working process, and really embracing a working process, so that it's not something that is that you set once and then it's done, but it's you develop in and you grow into what you set, and then you can take the next step and change it to something bigger if you like. That's something.
Yeah, absolutely. There was something that was in my mind then, and now it's gone.
That's right. I actually want to move on to something else, because that is you talked about just before the what you think is the biggest barrier in your niche. And we talked about getting yourself out there in the right way, in the authentic way, and the dangers of what you can do online and what you should do.
Yeah, I think one of the themes, or the theme of the topic that you sent me was, how to create a successful online, or how an online presence can help create a successful business. So, just prior to us jumping on, we were talking about, I think one of the things we need to be really careful of, because another thing that's great for business, like really great for business, is integrity. When people sense that you have a lot of integrity as a business owner, as a facilitator, as a service provider, a product provider, whatever it is, then, people feel kind of confident to do business with you. And I think with an online presence, it's actually quite easy to sort of be very manicured with your the version of you that you're putting out into the world. Now, of course, if you're building a brand and, you're trying to create a particular brand story and all the rest of it, like it is important to be selective of what you're kind of putting out there. But you want to make sure that you're always kind of keeping up with the image that you're presenting kind of online, and you're not creating a version of yourself online, which is very possible to do, that isn't the truth or isn't aligned with who you actually are and how you turn up when you're doing business or providing your business or whatever, because that creates a big disconnect, and it's not so good for business, I believe. So yeah, I think one of the dangers of the online presence space is being able to literally create whatever kind of brand, story and image that you want. And it's a great and powerful tool, but also just being really kind of sort of conscious and aware of keeping up with, doing your own consciousness work and personal development, self-care work really, to keep up with what that brand image is, and make sure you're turning up in alignment with that, not as a different version to what that is.
So it's it's a bit like personal branding with focus on integrity, truth, authenticity for business owner, what you put out there. I always say the most success you will have online is when you can recreate what you do offline, because I see so many people having beautiful one-on-one conversations, and they really take the person in front of them on a journey. They ask them about their problems. They give them a lot of value. They have a beautiful start to with a relationship. And then often when you then look what they do online, it's often like a really overwhelming website, kind of polished up or manicured, as you said, social media. And it's not really what they do when you meet them. So I always say you should recreate what you do there online. And the better you do that, the more successful you'll be with that.
Definitely. I think that's a fantastic approach. I really do. But, it's also interesting, like, if we take Oprah as an example. So Oprah is one of, if not the most successful woman on the planet from a business perspective. She's got huge amounts of success. She's loved by millions and millions of people, if not billions. She's, the only reason she doesn't need to get up in the morning if she doesn't want to go out and kind of make some money or do whatever, like she's really kind of, you could safely say she's one of those people that's really like arrived and made it. Now she still gets up and does her consciousness work every single day, and she talks about this freely and openly. Like her number one thing is, I do the work every single day, the self work, the kind of making sure she understands that sort of business often happens from who you're being, not necessarily what you're doing. And of course it's got to be a combination of things. You can't sit and just be in a chair all day and expect your business to work. You've got to go out and find the right strategies, get really good quality information, activate that information, work on that. But if the being isn't matching the doing, or the being isn't fueling the doing, and you're just doing first, then things will fall apart, you know. And so she talks about that a lot. There's a great interview, Stanford Business School interview that she does that people can find online, Oprah Stanford, you know, Stanford interview or whatever, where she talks about that as well in there. So yeah.
Very good, very good. It's a little bit like mechanics versus creativity or your inner game.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
As for the end for today, Eloise, I always ask, what are you three piece of advice that you could give someone if it comes to maybe around presenting yourself authentically online, this kind of personal branding with integrity?
Yeah, we can definitely. I had one other point actually around that, which
Please.
does tie in, and that's, I guess, my number one tip for people would be to run your own race. You know, don't, you know, when you, I don't know if you've ever watched swimmers are particularly renowned for this, like Olympic swimmers or like top swimmers across the globe. Like they get out of the pool, they've just won their 21st, you know, gold medal or something, and the interviewers sort of starts to ask them questions about their race and stuff, and really 9 times out of 10 they say a very similar thing, and that's just, I got in the water, I ran my own race. I didn't worry about, I knew what I had to do on the day. I'd trained for that. I'd rehearsed for that. I got in the water. I ran my own race. Didn't worry about what everybody else was doing, and you know, I got a great result. So I think that is my number one tip. If you learn how to run your own race and not, certainly, of course, be aware of what's going on in the world, but make stuff about your development, your extension, your kind of, you know, improvement, and not necessarily about comparing yourself to, you know, the number one player in your niche or whatever, because they've had their journey, they've had their struggles, they've done their, you know, they've had their muck ups and their sort of breakdowns and their whatever. And so, you know, they're just where they are and you're just where you are, and you can only be where you are, you know. So that would be my first tip to anybody in business, is run your own race and aim for personal bests, not necessarily industry bests, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And that for me comes really down to what my partner always tells me: you got to own what you chose to do and believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that feeds straight into the next one, which is to create goals for yourself that are not only achievable, but they're meaningful. So like you can feel, so you can make a goal to earn $1 million in a year. And then there might be some part of you, I mean, that might be a genuine goal for you. And if it is, there'll be a certain level of resonance, like within your heart or within your body, that makes that really meaningful for you. But for most people, they've just heard it from 1,000 other entrepreneurs and they pick the number, they go, oh, it'd be amazing to earn, you know, $1 million in a year. So I guess what I'm saying is find goals that are not only, like if you're earning $500 a week through your business, which is definitely the case. Sometimes you're earning minus in the early stages of a business, where you're actually spending and not earning in the early stages. So if you're earning minus $500 a week, let's say that, then maybe make the aim to earn minus $100, or to just break even in a week, and then from there $500, and then from there $1,000, and then from there, and then eventually down the track you might be, you know, the $1 million a year might actually be sort of achievable. But so I'd say make sure your goals are realistic, that they are about something that is meaningful, and they're not just regurgitated they're not just regurgitated figures or kind of ideas that you've heard around the traps, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And it ties right back to what we were talking about before, with like the vision is a working process, and don't set it too high. And yeah, love that.
Yeah. Actually, I remembered that thing that I was going to talk about when I forgot earlier. And that was that it was just bouncing off something you said, which was, for me, the greatest amount of pain in my entrepreneurial journey has absolutely come from wanting to be out there. Like, you know, I mean, I've had a certain level of success, there's no doubt about it, but wanting to be somewhere where I'm not, and it not happening fast enough. And so, and because of that, there's constantly this disconnect, and you're never allowed to just go, wow, what a successful day I've had, or what, because your only measure of success is getting to that thing out there. And so what I think is a much better way is just to kind of, as I said, be much more realistic, and be able to pat yourself on your back every day for the more sustainable goals that you achieve, which then creates more positive energy, which then allows you to eventually get to the, you know, to the bigger things down the track.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that, and I can so much relate to that, because now I really started to celebrate little wins. Like I had a small workshop couple weeks ago, and it was a great success. People loved it. And I went out for dinner with my partner afterwards. And we had a really nice dinner where we didn't worry about how much the bottle of wine would cost and things like that. And that really creates an amazing positive energy. And I totally agree with that.
Yeah, celebration is huge. So if you're not giving yourself sustainable and achievable goals to then be able to hit and celebrate, then you never get to generate that positive energy, which just fuels the next thing as well. So yeah, good on you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And look,
something else you like to share?
Well, just the last tip I think we touched on in the interview already, but it's just that there's nothing more important than your own self-love, your own roots, you know, roots of self. At the end of the day, the business is not, it's not a brand, it's not a building, it's not anything. It is actually you know, like you're the person that's generating the energy, that's actually generating the activity, that's generating like the connections, that's generating, you know, and everything else that comes after that. So make sure that your number one priority is your own self-care, your own strength of self, really, like making sure those roots just are nourished and watered and grow really deep, so that whatever you create in the world can be as amazing as you want it to be and your capacity allows for.
Wonderful. And that is exactly in line what I heard from Jack Delosa from the Entourage in Sydney, who said your business growth is the size of your business is a direct reflection of your personal growth. And I thought that, just a quote that came to mind. At least that's so amazing. You tapped into so many things that I have been through and I struggled with, and really raised the importance of the inner game and how important that is to take care of yourself. And I think this is such a powerful and important message, because so many, not only business owners in the health and wellness industry, but generally business owners forget about that. And it's really easy to do. It's not something you choose. You kind of just fall into it because you think you have to make it work, right? This has to happen. I know I want it to happen. And it's so easy to get caught up in the mechanics and forget to love yourself. So thank you so much for joining in today and sharing this with us, and your story especially.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to have the opportunity to connect and have a chat.
Yeah, have a chat. Exactly. We will have everyone who is interested in learning more about Eloise. We will have all the links and the things that we talked about, and the links in the podcast notes, in the show notes. So it will be easy and very easy to get to Souluversity and Self-Love Project. And I encourage everyone to subscribe to the podcast. Would love to see you all next week again with Dave Nixon, who is a great person in a different field again. And I see you all next week again. Thank you, Eloise.
No worries. Thank you, Sebastian, and big love to all your listeners.